Welcome to the SeizeYourBusiness.com podcast and video blog. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law. Jim Wazak, my radio partner, couldn't make it today. We're happy to be joined by Bob Greisman from RKG Business Growth Advisors, and he does exit planning, and today we're going to talk about how to build a valuable business. So thanks so much for being with us today,
Oh, my
Bob.
pleasure.
So tell us a little about what you do and your background.
I work with business owners of small to mid-sized companies, helping them grow better businesses. And a business very often has issues that stand in the way of greater success. We focus on finding and fixing those issues. I've spent many years as both a management consultant and a partner in major CPA firms and working with business owners in a variety of industries.
So we were talking offline, and we've done some episodes on exit planning before, but what interested me when you and I were talking was that it seems like exit planning for you it's not all about the exit. It's about building a business that's going to be sellable or valuable and transferable to your family, just get the business ready for sale, right?
Yeah. I think about exit planning in a very broad context. Yeah, certainly the transaction itself, the ultimate sale, is important. And sometimes it's not a sale, it's a transfer to family members. But the more important elements that come both before and after are building a valuable business, which allows an owner to be in a position to control his timing and the terms of his exit when it comes. And the other element is ultimately life and legacy after the exit or the transition. So in terms of exit planning as a discipline, it needs to cover all of those things: building a valuable business, the actual transaction, the selling of the business, and life and legacy afterwards.
So what are the factors that go into a business being valuable and not valuable, and what levers can you help people pull?
Value is kind of an interesting concept. I think most owners don't even think about business value. If you ask an owner what they're interested in, particularly divorced from the concept of a sale of the business, they're going to tell you they want a lot of income, right? They want growth of the business. They want more locations. They want more employees. So those are all good things. They're all things that drive or allow rather for people to produce good lifestyles and provide for their families very well, but they don't necessarily equate to value. Here's an important point. A profitable business is not necessarily a valuable business.
Make the distinction for me.
Well, profits of a company are a piece of it. Owners know, and most people in business know, that valuations are often derived by something called EBITDA, earnings before interest and taxes and depreciation and amortization, times a multiple. So there's the E, that's the earnings, and that's the profits, and people understand that and they focus on it. What they don't focus on is the multiple, which is really derived from a qualitative sort of thing. It's not a function of numbers, it's a function of the health of the business. It's how sustainable is the business, how transferable is the business, and that's what gives rise to the value of the business. So it's really getting into the business and looking at the business in its health, in its operations, that make the business valuable. That's not the same thing as profitable. Let me give you one example. You could look at a company and you can look at the growth charts of two different companies, and one has a growth chart going way up and another has a flat chart. Intuitively, you'd probably jump to the conclusion that the more valuable business is the one that's showing the uptrend. But you need to get behind the numbers. If the business with the uptrend is in say, a tech business where the rising tide is rising everybody, and the other business that's flat has actually seen major drastic adverse consequences in its business, and it's had to turn over its whole product line, and it's had to change how it does business, and it's had to respond to adversity, that could be a much more valuable business because it's capable of responding to adversity and changes and innovation. So you can't just look at the numbers. You have to look at the underlying story behind the numbers to determine the value of a business.
So how is this market set? You said the multiple is determined by kind of basically the story of the business, right? And probably the industry it's in and the type of business it is. But, housing market, really easy to figure out. You look at comparable houses, same square footage, same neighborhood. How is the market set for varying businesses?
Okay, good question. The way the market's set for businesses is the exact opposite of the way it's set for housing. It's an incredibly irrational process. There's a little rationality to it, but largely irrational. So the question you'd have to ask, and this would be the first question, the first thing I would tell owners in even thinking about selling their business, is know who your buyer is, or think at least about who your buyer is. Good business people know their customer. They ought to know their buyer. There are a whole community of buyers out there, and they're vastly different, and they will value businesses differently. They aren't all the same. So an example, a private equity firm that's looking to buy a business as an investment is going to value it one way. It might look at the business as a turnaround situation. Can we buy this business when it's the bottom of its cycle or when it's in a distressed situation and pay a low price for it, and therefore then turn it around and later make money and sell by making, sell at a high price and make money? Or another firm might say, we just want to buy a business for a nice steady return, and they're going to pay one price. A strategic buyer, or sometimes an industry buyer, is one who's going to buy a company totally divorced from the multiple. They're not going to look at earnings. They're not going to look at multiple. They want to buy that company because strategically it has some value to them. And very often strategic buyers will pay a much higher price, sometimes an irrationally higher price than what normal methods of looking at valuation would seem to indicate. And there's lots of examples of that happen every day in the newspapers of big public companies that go out and pay outrageous prices for companies that aren't even making money, but they're doing so, at least hopefully, for a good strategic reason. We'll roll that back to small businesses. That has a play there too. The small business, if it's strategic to somebody else, could be very valuable, but might not be so valuable to, let's say, an investor.
So you're right. It's the opposite of the real estate market, because I never understood in the real estate market how, for example, in Downers Grove, where my primary office is, everyone's always complaining there's no inventory, there's no houses being sold, but the price doesn't go up because it's basically, or it goes up very gradually because it's basically set by this almost artificial thing, comparables and appraisals. In the business world, it seems like it's, very personalized. There's maybe one or two buyers, and they're going to really dig into the way your business operates, the way you have set it up to be sold, and the more homework you've done, you can actually really have an effect on the price.
Absolutely, there's no question. And again, recognizing the fact that a business, this plays both ways. A business might be very valuable to the owner because it produces a good income to him. It might not be at all valuable to somebody else who's going to buy that business for a lot of reasons. But again, two different buyers who have two different objectives in buying this company could have very different views on what the value is. So part of the trick is to understand who the potential buyer is, what's driving them, and what makes the business valuable to them. But it is actually probably a highly irrational process.
Well, that's kind of marketing 101. Marketing any product, you need to know who you're selling to. And so what are the top 3 or 4 things that someone can do to turn a business that may be profitable? I'll use an example of a law firm. A law firm that's turning a profit but is entirely based on my cult of personality, and if I'm gone, it's all based on my networking. That's not going to be valuable to anybody, no matter how profitable it is. What can business owners do to turn their business from something that's turning a profit into something that's value, or to increase the value? So
the starting point for increasing value is to really understand that a business, any business, big or small, at its essential core is a collection of systems and processes. And very broadly, you've got sales, you've got people, you've got operations, you've got accounting and management. And then overlaying that, understand that strategy and leadership are also actually processes. So it's a question of looking at all of those things and how well they function together that go into making a healthy business. Characteristics of valuable businesses are that they are, you just referred to this, they're not owner dependent. That's probably the number one problem that small business owners have, is they have businesses that are very dependent on them. So the first thing an owner can do to make a business more valuable is to and sometimes it's hard for them to do, is to step away from it, begin building the team, and begin building a situation where if they were gone, the business would still function very well without them. Now, that's a good thing to do even if you're not going to sell the business. It's a good, solid business technique, but it's very valuable in creating value in a business.
That's why it doesn't hurt. And I always tell people, and I'm sure you say the same thing, it's never too early to start thinking about exit planning. I wish we didn't all refer to it as exit planning, because just the fact of putting systems in place, getting good managers, good leaders within your organization, that'll make you more profitable anyway. Right.
These steps of building value build a better business. And again, the goal of exit planning, particularly if it's long-term and far into the future, is not necessarily to have the exit per se. It's to be in a position to put the owner in a position of control, that he can decide the terms and the timing of when he's going to make his exit or transition. And if you have a good, solid business, you can do that. You can decide you're going to stay longer. You could decide if it's a good enough business, you're not going to exit at all and let management run the business and just reap the profits, or you sell. But if you don't take those steps, you might find yourself in a squeeze position where not only, where you can't exit. In fact, we see many businesses that if the owner sold the businesses and they paid their taxes and saw what they had left, and they invested that reasonably, they're not going to earn anywhere near as much as they're earning keeping the business. So they end up getting locked into having to keep the business because of the income it derives them. And that's a bad position to be in.
And it seems to me that if you can get to the point, we've been in business for 6 years now, and we're just now getting to the point where we're starting to realistically put the business in a box where, it's got systems in place, they're in writing, maybe they're fluid, but at least there's a process for everything. And I actually have levers of power within the business I can pull to accomplish things and reports to make decisions based. So that's a really hard place to get to and a really daunting project for somebody.
It's a tough thing, and it's really tough, and certain personalities adapt to that better than do others. The big transition for owners and founders very often is making the transition from being the owner or the founder to being a CEO, because having those systems, having operating controls, having corporate governance in place, those are systems and processes, and very often owners like to do it on the fly. An example I like to give is the owner who starts a business and he's the world's greatest salesman. He can sell his product all day long and sell it great. The business grows to a certain level where he can't do all the selling. He's got to have salespeople, but very often you find these people who are great salesmen or women are terrible at managing sales departments, and they can't do it. And so the business...
That's a really tricky thing to do, is managing a sales department, period.
So at that point, an owner has to be able to have the perception to know, I can't do this. You need to bring in the right people. You need to make assignments to other people. You need to have a high-level sales manager to take over the things he or she can't do. So for owners, it's a big mind change from being the owner, the founder, the person who did everything, from changing the light bulbs and making the coffee to making the big sales, to now delegating and having other people take on responsibility.
Well, that kind of separates the wheat from the chaff of business owners, the people that are willing to delegate and grow, and those that are, just happy to have their little small business that's them doing everything and have a job, basically.
Well, that's right. And a lot of it does come down to just that. It's the distinction between having an enterprise and having an income. In one moment you're doing what you do so you have an income, and when the day is done and it's time to close up shop, you close up the doors and it's over, versus having an enterprise that has value, that's sustainable, that's transferable. And again, there's a skill that's a different skill than starting a business to growing a business that has those attributes to be able to be transferable.
Other than just calling you up and working with you, which people should probably do, but what is the first step down that path from being not systematized, from being a cult of personality around the owner to, get to the point where it's a business in a box that you can sell to somebody and anyone can run it?
Well, I think the owner has to make the conscious decision that they're going to make that transition. And some do it very, very well and do it naturally, and they do it without coaching and they do it without help. It just comes to them. But it's a moment of self-reflection for an owner to say, I'm at a certain point, what has to be different? What has to change? And very often what has to change is the owner has to change. So I'll give you the story of a business owner who called me recently, and he said he's on his fourth business. He's run 4 different businesses. He's built 3 of them up successfully, sold them. But his problem was every business that he built, he could never get it past $2 million in sales a year. That was his threshold. Now he's hitting $2 million with his 4th business and just can't seem to get past that. Well, the problem was very obvious. All of those businesses resided on his back. He did everything. He was the core of it. He never could get himself to be at the point that he could transition things and responsibilities to other people. So it starts with the owner recognizing this, recognizing what is it going to take, whether it's personal coaching, whether it's personal development, whether it's moving out of their comfort zone. And for many, it will be a very comfortable transition. But they have to be able to do that to be able to get to the next level. Once they get past that point and recognize this is what has to get done, then the rest of it actually becomes quite easy.
Well, and then what I'm finding is it becomes a game of what projects can you delegate to somebody, and how can you free up your time more and more to work on higher and higher things. And I'm not there yet, but when I'm winning, when I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm reevaluating systems, working on my strategic plan, meeting with leaders within my organization, not putting out fires or, dealing with day-to-day tasks. And that's a long process, but it's, you're right. I think it's the decision all right, I'm going to find one thing I can delegate to somebody else.
But there's some simple ways to do that. I mean, a starting point is to sit down, if a company doesn't already have this, and really take every person in the organization. We're typically talking about small businesses with, 5 to maybe 20 employees. What is every person's job description? Let's actually go through and chart out not a fancy organization chart, but what is every function, every person, everybody who's in the company, what's their job, what should it be, what is the definition, what are the range of responsibilities, and then analyzing, are they doing the right things? Because you may find out you don't have the right people in the right seats. And it's not a question necessarily of firing people. Sometimes it's a question of moving. An example I gave is can give us a 5-person sales department of a company that was really struggling with sales. The most technical guy they had, and it was a technical product they sold, was an inside salesman. He's the guy who was the back room who supported the other salesmen, and then the other guys had to go out and talk to the engineers they sold to. We said, why don't we flip this around? Why don't we take the most technical person and put him in the position of going out and talking? And they did that, and it had a major impact on the sales impact. So sometimes it's just a question of rearranging and making sure that if you have the job description and you match up people's capabilities, you don't necessarily have the right people in the right seats.
Well, and so someone wants to work with you. They may be like me. I'm not planning on selling my business anytime soon, but it sounds like I could get a lot of value by having you kind of, coach me into getting the business set up the right way. It sounds like you can help people at any stage.
Yeah,
right?
we work with people at any stage, and actually most of our work is not in the exit planning area because most of our owners are not thinking about selling. But when owners get to be about age 55, and they still may not be thinking about selling till they're 65 or 70, that's the time they need to be thinking about exit planning. It's best to have a long runway. If you got 7 or 10 or even more years, you can do a lot of things. The worst case is when you get to the point that an owner says, I'm ready to sell now, and I'm just kind of out of steam, and there isn't a lot of runway. There isn't time to build these systems and processes and put them in place. And I've seen a lot of situations where, I referred to this before, owner fatigue. An owner gets to the end of the line and hasn't done the job of building the business, and they maybe have the time to do so, but they don't have the energy to do so anymore. And others who work in this field see it a lot too. Owner fatigue. People get to be 60, 65 or older. They just haven't got it in them anymore to push, and they end up selling, either having to just shut down the business and not sell it, or they end up selling at prices much lower than the business should really be worth.
Is it strange to have owner fatigue at 35?
Not that just takes a good, nice long weekend.
Yeah, I think maybe I need a vacation.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
We're going to have your contact info at our website, seizeyourbusiness.com, in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming, and I encourage our listeners and viewers to reach out to Bob if they have any questions or if they'd like to use his services.
My pleasure. Thanks.